Good morning. At every service we hold here, I begin this way. Whoever you are, and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here at King's Chapel. Believer or doubter, seeker or skeptic, of one faith or of no faith, you are welcome at King's Chapel, because we are all on this journey together. Today we come to this church from across the country to be together in one place, to mourn the enormous loss we feel with the death of Henry Lee, and also to give thanks for the many ways in which we have been blessedly enriched by his life. We come together because we need one another now. Henry Lee, father of Henry and Karen, Eliza and Thomas, grandfather of Heather and David, Olivia, Elliot, and Jacob, James, Elizabeth, and Daniel, Sam, and Tiana. Henry was a great-grandfather, a father-in-law to Mary and Gretchen, uncle, cousin, neighbor, civic leader, and dear friend to so many of you. Welcome to you all. Henry knew so many of us in so many ways. From the workers at the local garage where he parked his car for decades, to mayors and governors, from the arborists who tended trees along the Commonwealth Mall, he occasionally did himself as well. But from those arborists to the thousands who generously supported the public garden. From children at all those schools where he worked and their parents, but also to generations of friends and neighbors on Beacon Hill and throughout Boston. Now, whether on a particular matter you agreed or disagreed with Henry, you would always appreciate his kindness and diplomacy and his perseverance, his gentleness and that tenacious advocacy, his accomplishments and his humility. Henry was such a part of our lives and the life of the city, it's hard to believe he is gone. So we come together this morning to King's Chapel, entering a place of sanctuary, where all the feelings ever experienced by humankind have been felt before. They've all been felt before here in times gone by. Sorrow and pain and hurt, but also laughter and the lightness that comes with the comfort and new freedom. Sometimes we feel regret or rage or forgiveness, those tears that course down our cheeks, or the warmth and depth of memories. Any of all of these feelings may be experienced by you here today, and all are understood here. All are honored in this place of healing. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, whose other name is love, your kindness is everlasting. You seek for us all life abundant and freedom from whatever enslaves us. Today we thank you for your servant Henry, through whom we saw the gifts of life that you intend for all of us. May we learn from his gentle ways how to be more gentle ourselves, from his focus on issues close to us, how we also can impact the needs around us. From his ability to tackle seemingly hopeless causes without giving up. Now, O God, with grateful hearts that also are broken, we ask that you journey with us in our grief as you journey on with Henry too, in the unending love that surrounds him and us forevermore. Take any regrets we may have and teach us through them. Then set us free with the balm of forgiveness, because we are certain that nothing can separate us from your love or for Henry's, for love never ends. As with the light of candles on the Lee dinner table, when they are put out at the end of a long evening, we watch those smoke tendrils curl upward in the air, and slowly they dissipate until they seem to vanish. But science teaches us that the light is still there, though in a form we can no longer see. Henry's light is not lost, nor our love. Uphold us in that promise, dear God. Amen. Now, joining together to acclaim both the Creator and the beauty of the creation, let us all rise together. now begin that part of the service where we are blessed to hear from those who knew Henry, about him.
On my desk at home, I keep a photograph of a group of members of the Massachusetts Historical Society taken during a trip to Europe led by David McCullough in 2000. We followed the footsteps of John Adams, who had served as a diplomat in France, the Netherlands, and England during and after the Revolution. In the photograph, we are standing outside the place where the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, the treaty that ended the American Revolution and formally recognized the United States as independent. Henry Lee is, as I will always remember him, standing there looking slightly away, bemused to be at the center of attention in his usual diffident way. A word more about that photograph in a minute, but in brief, Henry Lee was a member of the Historical Society for 58 years, an officer for 25 years, and the president of the Historical Society between 1987 and 2000. Henry Lee's services to the Historical Society were so varied and important, I'm not going to try to go through them today. Instead, I would like to just call your attention to one aspect of his leadership, which we might all wish to emulate. Calm and quiet, invariably good-humored and self-effacing, but remarkably effective. When William Fowler, a former director of the Historical Society, and I were reminiscing about our respective introductions to President Lee, Henry, and this is probably the only time I will call him Henry rather than Henry Lee, Bill Fowler summed up Henry's early advice to him. Bill, he said, we want the Historical Society to change, but we just don't want anybody to notice it. When about 10 years before I had become the librarian of the Historical Society, Henry Lee asked me to give him a behind-the-scenes tour of the Historical Society, the MHS, as we call it. I had recently become the librarian. I thought he had it backwards. He was so familiar, had worked, done his own historical research, and then had held offices at the Historical Society, that he should be giving me the tour. Only later did I realize the tour wasn't in fact a tour, it was sort of an interview and an opportunity for Henry to tell me something that was equally important to my role as overseeing a research library, and that is he wanted me to see how I could not just do that, but also to convey to a wider public the intellectual excitement of such a place. He was helping me understand an important aspect of my job, as if I had discovered it for myself. That historical documents, no matter how treasured, don't speak for themselves but have to be interpreted, and that the role of the interpreter is to make that available to a wider public, not call attention to the interpreter. Also, by example, Henry Lee always demonstrated the power of self-deprecating good humor. We once had a crisis, and it doesn't take much to have a crisis at a historical research library, when a scheduled speaker didn't appear, while I dashed off to phone and find out if there had been a family, an accident or some family problem. Henry sort of stretched out his remarks to sort of cover the space. When I returned saying that someone sitting in his office in Belmont wasn't about to appear in the Back Bay of Boston to speak, Henry turned this sort of stretching out into a really amusing story about the worst talk he had ever attended. And then, in his own mysterious way, convinced other people present, the by now restless audience, to convey their, to enter in sort of a competition who had been at the worst public meeting. And truly, the last thing, and I think to go back to my opening, is that in this tour of Europe, Henry Lee, the idea of it was to bond members of the Historical Society more closely together. And again, this was new to the Historical Society and membership, and people who were essentially strangers were meeting in the first time during the course of this trip. And it was remarkable how at the beginning of this trip in the Netherlands, everything went wrong. In fact, there were some things that were ludicrously wrong, and it culminated in the group missing a train connection from The Hague to Paris because someone had not observed that it was the day when summertime turned to wintertime, that is, standard time in Europe, so they had miscalculated when we had to be at the station. So there we were kind of on our own at a railroad station in the Netherlands. And as we were reorganized to make our way to Paris, Henry Lee went out of his way to sort of have, in his calm, definite way, sort of make people see this as perhaps part of an adventure rather than a disaster. And because this problem culminated in an overnight bus trip to Paris, even there, Henry kind of delegated members of the group to go to a nearby Dutch liquor store and empty the shelves so we could fortify ourselves for the trip. And I think during the course of that trip, I added to my job, the description of my job, steward for the drinks on the bus trip. But during the course of that, in all these things that had gone wrong, the fact that the person at the center of this was looking upon this with some amusement, I think changed the tone of it. And when we arrived in Paris, what happened was sort of remarkable. Joan and Henry Lee were very familiar with Paris. Joan's sister, Diana, was then living in Paris, and we were shown all of the out-of-the-way restaurants and all of the romantic places in Paris. We were sort of invited into the way they appreciated the city, which made something that had started out awful sort of wonderful, maybe especially so because it had been so awful. Now, looking back upon this was not all the work of Henry Lee, but he sort of, without making it, pressuring anyone, he made it something that we all participated in. So looking back on that trip many years later, I'm reminded of an adage by a famous Boston wit of the 19th century, Thomas Gold Appleton. All Bostonians, when they die, if they are good, go to Paris. Joan and Henry Lee, you will always have Paris.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you all for coming to celebrate my father. This is called The Walnut Tree, and I'm sure many of you know it, by David McCord. There once was a swing in a walnut tree, as tall and double as a swing might be, at the edge of the hill where the branches spread, so it swung the valley right under me. Then down and back as the valley fled, I wonder if that old tree is dead. I could look straight up in the lifting heart of the black old walnut tree there and start my flying journey from green to blue with a wish and a half that the ropes would part and sail me out into the courses true, as the crows in a flock had dared me to. I swung from the past to the far dim days, forever ahead of me. Through the haze I saw the steeple, a flash of white, and I gave a shout for the scare and the praise of being a boy on the verge of flight. And I pumped on that swing with all my might, till the valley widened. Oh, I could guess from the backward no to the forward yes, that the world begins with a sweep of an eye, with the wonder of it all, more or less. And the last hello to the first goodbye, and a swing in the walnut tree is why. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dad.
One of the things Henry particularly liked to do was have lunch at the Tavern Club. And the Tavern Club loved having lunch with him. I loved hearing his stories of his storied life. I think my favorite was when he was stationed in Germany in charge of giving out visas and making sure that no Nazis snuck into the United States. So he had this fellow he was interviewing who said, no, I was never a Nazi. I was part of the resistance. And Henry thought that he looked too young. And he thought if he smoked a pipe, it would make him look older and more serious. But as he admitted, he wasn't very good at it. So he searched around for his pipe and found it, and then searched around for his tobacco pouch, and he found that, and then he put the tobacco in the pipe and damped it down with one of those little things. All the while he has never lost eye contact. But then he's having trouble lighting the match and getting the pipe started, and all of a sudden his interlocutor says, okay, I was a Nazi, but I was just a kid. And there was never a better raconteur than Henry Lee.
I am going to read a poem that my father really enjoyed, and I think a lot of people his generation really kept this to heart. I always felt that he sort of hung his experiences and his disappointments and all sorts of things on this poem. It was sort of a structure for him. So the poem is If, by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill an unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you.
I invite you all to rise. And we will be saying in unison these words from the Gospel of Matthew, which are actually the words of the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and then he began to speak and taught them, saying together, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Please be seated.
I am here to pay tribute to Henry Lee's remarkable civic life and the impact that he made on our city's public spaces and institutions, and on so many of us who had the great good fortune of knowing him and being able to work with him. I began to lead a double life in the early 1970s, Henry confessed in 1997, when asked to reflect on his work as president of the Friends of the Public Garden. That was when he agreed, as he put it, in a moment of absolutely no foresight, to become president of the Friends, formed to advocate for the public garden, which was then in such terrible shape it was almost beyond saving. As soon as he said yes, the fledgling organization was swept up in a battle to fight a massive development that would have cast destructive shadows onto the garden. Henry recalled how he was in a classroom teaching one day when a reporter called him for a statement. That evening, he heard himself on the radio attempting halting comments about the threat of the development, interspersed with commands to the students to keep quiet. This story is vintage Henry. Self-deprecating, you've heard a theme, witty, not taking himself too seriously. What he did take seriously was the need to defeat the project and to save the garden. And he became the chair of Boston's first civic advisory committee, the Park Plaza CAC, to do just that. And Henry did not just advocate, he acted. He picked up trash, later recalling that a walk through the garden would mean you'd be shuffling through trash. He injected elms with fungicide, coming home from New Hampshire in the summer if the work needed to be done and a contractor could not be found. And he watered trees in Copley Square with Stella Trafford, another giant of the Friends' early years. Henry was a model of what it means to dedicate your life to the greater good. His most visible legacy is in our parks and their preservation when they were most threatened. It is also in our city's public art, when he worked to revive the moribund Art Commission in the 1990s, and with the city set up a program, Adopt a Statue, to restore sculpture throughout Boston from the Common to Jamaica Pond. He advocated for the creation of the Landmarks Commission at a time when there were no protections for historic places. He once said, "It is not possible for one park to prosper when others are in decline," and joined forces with other park advocates, becoming the first chair of the Boston Green Space Alliance Board. His impact on our public realm was enormous. Less visible, but less important, most important, was his influence on those around him. He was a mentor for me and scores of park advocates throughout Boston and beyond. He invited us to call on our better angels to defend our irreplaceable green spaces, not with stridency or anger, but with disarming diplomacy and persistence. Henry had that rare ingredient in activists, a sense of humor, and an unerring instinct for navigating the thickets of politics and public opinion. There was a man years ago who wrote us regularly complaining that the duckling statue promoted the single-parent family and that something should be done about it. I would get frustrated and impatient with the man, but Henry would indulge him and diffuse his anger, writing back to him sympathetically about the plight of men these days. How does a small organization caring for 3 parks in one city come to have members in 32 states? The answer is largely Henry Lee. He connected personally with everyone. We all have Henry's letters that we cherish years after he penned them to us, thanking us for contributing or speaking out and opposing a project or event that would damage the parks. I heard from so many people when we told our community that Henry had passed away. The plumber who cares for our fountains, recalling how Henry would come by and they'd have conversations about everything from politics to education to plumbing. The member from California who said he continues to be a supporter because of Henry, despite having moved away from Boston over 30 years ago, and who sent me 2 acknowledgement letters that Henry typed out and sent to him that he has saved since the 1990s. In one letter, Henry wrote, "This is an unconscionably slow response to your very generous contribution to the Friends. Lewis and Clark made the trip almost as fast." His annual print newsletters were long form, no doubt judged by today's standards as lost in too much detail, not snappy enough. And yet they are masterpieces of wit, understatement, and clever appeal for advocacy and for funds. Everyone waited with anticipation for their arrival in their mailboxes. Here is an excerpt from 2002. Work on the base of the Washington Memorial will commence after Labor Day. For several months, we hope no more, the statue will be at ground level and the surrounding area a scene of destruction. Then, according to plan, the father of our nation will return to his pedestal, sword in hand, surveying new lawns, landscape improvements, and better lighting. We hold our breath. You wanted to be at meetings if only to hear Henry speak. And if you had the dubious distinction of speaking that evening as well, you prayed that you would go before Henry. It was mortifying to go after him. People hung on his every word as he cast a spell on the audience with contagious charm and brilliant turns of phrase. When Henry stopped writing that print newsletter, a member from St. Louis wrote, "Don't ask me if I'm enjoying the holidays. Gloom has descended with the news that Henry Lee is ending his long tenure as author of the annual fall newsletter. I originally joined the Friends because as a member of the Friends of Tower Grove Park here in St. Louis, I wanted to see how our fellow National Historic Landmark was faring. But since I have not visited Boston in recent years, my primary motivation for continuing my membership has been the opportunity to revel once a year in Mr. Lee's graceful and courtly prose. He evokes a Chekhovian world, cultured and at ease, deeply rooted in human and civic values, resigned to the frailty of human nature and the inevitable ravages of time, but confident that goodwill will prevail. I dare say that even in the hub of the universe, there is nobody like him, and I dare say that there isn't. Henry, I want you to know how much you have meant to me and to so many others who have the privilege of knowing you. I'm wearing a pin that you gave me years ago. We were hosting a reception to raise money to restore the George Robert White Memorial Fountain in the garden, and I remarked how much I liked the pin you were wearing. The next day, you came into the office and gave it to me. It says dream. You committed yourself to a dream, to the vision of a city where we valued our public spaces and ensured they were healthy and available to all. You showed us how to advocate for our civic realm with diplomacy, with tact, and with determination while not taking ourselves too seriously. You passed that work on to the next generation, which you did so graciously as you retired from active leadership, so rare for a founding leader. We honor Henry's memory best when we pick up the baton, the cause of public service that animated his life, and keep his dream alive.
I found this one rummaging through some letters of his mother's condolences after she passed. I thought this was just as appropriate for him as it was for her. It is Death is a Door by Nancy Bird Turner. Death is only an old door set in a garden wall. On gentle hinges it gives at dusk when the thrushes call. Along the lintel are green leaves. Beyond, the light lies still. Very willing and weary feet pass over that sill. There is nothing to trouble one's heart, nothing to hurt at all. Death is only a quiet door in a lovely garden wall. Thank you.
You may remain seated. Let us say together the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
I would like to join my sister in thanking you all for coming here this morning. My father would be very honored. We are truly grateful for the outpouring of kindness that we have received in the form of cards, letters, phone calls, conversations, and I just wish Dad was here to see how much people care about him, and I know he would be very touched. My father died in Beverly Farms, the town in which he was raised, in the house that his father built, next to the beach where he met my mother, in a place that he loved. The speakers that preceded me have talked about many of Dad's achievements and what he meant to the city, to the people of Boston and Beacon Hill, and to the many people whose lives he touched. I would like to take a few minutes to tell you about who my father was as a person. Dad used to say that you measured success by the challenges that you had to overcome to achieve that success. Whether you were gifted with superior intelligence, skill, or athletic ability was not as important as whether you were committed to a goal or a cause and were willing to give the effort required to achieve that goal. My father lived by that code all his life. Growing up, Dad was a sickly child. Doctors told his parents that he would probably not live past his 12th birthday. His family lost all their money in the 1930s in the matchstick scandal that swept Europe and the United States. And when he was accepted at Harvard, he had to defer because his family did not have the funds to pay the tuition. At what he referred to as the lowest point of his life, two things happened. First, he met my mother. He met her at a boat party which his parents forced him to attend against his wishes. And he fell in love that day and formed a partnership with my mother, Joan, that lasted 76 years. The two of them were inseparable. My mother was truly the wind beneath my father's wings, and she supported him unconditionally throughout his life. Second, his grandmother introduced him to Henry Lee Shattuck. Shattuck was my grandfather's first cousin, and he had a long and storied career in Boston, the state legislature, at Harvard, and in business. He took an instant liking to my father, and he agreed to pay all 4 years of his college education. But more importantly, he regaled him with stories about Boston and its history, stories about Martin LeMasney, James Michael Curley, Calvin Coolidge, Leverett Saltonstall, and more importantly, he instilled in Dad a love for this city and the political history that underpins it, a sense of civic pride in its neighborhood, its people, and its institutions. Cousin Harry's lessons remain like seeds planted, waiting to bloom, as Dad subsequently spent 9 years in the Foreign Service and more than 2 decades teaching and managing schools around Boston. One day in the early 1970s, 2 neighbors on Beacon Hill visited my father and asked if he would be interested in helping them with a small organization to enhance the Boston Public Garden. They had a total of only $200 in donations, and Dad knew absolutely nothing about gardens, horticulture, or parks. For reasons that puzzle even himself, he accepted, and the rest is history. I will not go into all that he accomplished, for the speakers that preceded me this morning have done an excellent job. But there are 2 aspects that I would like to highlight. First, Dad did an enormous amount of work without looking as if he was doing much at all. He was the true epitome of a gentleman. But at the end of the day, everything was done, and it was always done very, very well. He must have headed up over a dozen organizations in his lifetime, and in each instance, the organization became better because of his leadership. Partly it was because he cared so much, but also because he never gave less than 100%. Second, he loved the opportunities to contribute to this city, and he loved the people with whom he worked, or in some instances, the people who actually opposed him. It's not very well known, but my father and Kevin White became friends in the mayor's final years, and many members of the Mayor White staff would periodically visit our house at 90 Mount Vernon Street for a meal or just a short chat. It is said that you can tell a lot about a person by what they love. Dad loved summers in Dublin, the lake, family tennis, swimming, painting various parts of the house, each year a different shade of brown, and sunsets on the porch. He loved going to Harvard football games. He went to his first in 1932. Harvard lost to Army 42-0. And his last in 2023, and this time they won. He attended Harvard football games for 91 years. He loved track and field meets. It brought back memories of his own father. And we never missed a BA event at the Garden and went to many indoor meets in New York. He loved his children, his 10 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. And most of all, he loved the opportunity that this community and all of you gave him. The opportunity to contribute to the betterment of a city that he cared about so much. You know, I was trying to think of how to describe what he leaves behind. The trees in the garden, the statues, the swan boats, the flowers, the paths. But one person said to me that all of these were secondary. What my father left was a deep sense of joy that anyone who has walked in the public garden on a sunny spring day has experienced. He truly left a legacy that will stand the test of time. There is a tradition in my family that has been repeated for over 150 years. It is a poem that is read by the eldest son at his father's service. It is a way for the family to say goodbye. Today, it is also a way for the city of Boston, its neighborhoods, and its people to say goodbye. And it's a fitting poem when you look at the picture at the back of this program. It's a poem by Alfred Tennyson. Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, and when that which drew from the boundless deep turns again home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out of bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar.
Please rise. This commendation is taken from the King's Chapel prayer book, which with some amendments we've been using since 1686. So as with the farewell that Henry just so beautifully gave us, let us join together with this commendation. Go forth, dear Henry. Go forth in the name of God who created you, in the name of the Eternal who steadfastly loves you, in the name of the Almighty in whose house you will dwell forever. Go forth upon your journey from this world, in communion with all those who have come before you. May you live in peace this day. May your dwelling be in endless light, and may you find your place in God's kingdom. May he rest in peace. Immediately following the benediction, I will be escorting the family up the center aisle. They will be leaving and going directly to the Somerset Club, where they look forward to greeting you all. O Lord, support us all the day long of this life, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes, and the busy world is hushed, and the fever of life is over, and our work is done. Then in thy mercy, grant us a safe lodging and a holy rest, and peace at the last. Amen. Please be seated.